Thanks for joining us for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. Our next guest has insights into the current government financial woes and how it affects you. Let's welcome Tim Sargent to Boom and Bust. He is a former Government of Canada Deputy Minister and currently is the Director of the Domestic Policy Program at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute think tank in Ottawa. Welcome to Boom and Bust.
Thanks, Tony.
I guess the first question is, you recently wrote that Canadians are taxed to the max and that at the same time, government services seem to be in decline. Can you elaborate on that thesis, please?
Sure. So if we look over the last 10 years, what we've seen is government expenditure in Canada at all levels rising quite rapidly. But most of all at the federal government level. You've seen federal government expenditure rise by 77% since 2015. That's faster than population, it's faster than prices, it's faster than GDP. At the same time, we've got pretty high levels of taxation in Canada. Here in Ontario, where I'm sitting, if I earn a top marginal tax rate's 53.5%, and that doesn't take into account sales tax and property tax and all of those other taxes that we love to pay. So we've really seen the federal government in particular go on a spending spree with our money. And so the question is, what have we got for it?
Yeah, and so what do we get for that? That's the second part of the equation. Government services aren't what they should be?
Well, certainly if you ask Canadians, you poll Canadians, they feel the government's actually giving them less than they did 10 years ago. And it's not always easy to measure what government does. Something like national defense, how do you measure that? But there are a lot of areas where we can actually measure quite well what government does. And what we did in a study is we took a couple of areas, healthcare, education, and public safety, did a deep dive into the numbers. And what we found confirms what people think. We're actually getting less for our dollar than we did before, not more.
And what does the long-term future trend look like then?
Well, it's quite worrying. We're seeing the share of government spending in GDP rising. It's gone up from about 40% of GDP. So that's everything that we earn 10 years ago is now 43%. You can't keep increasing spending like that without paying for it. And one problem is that although taxes are high, they've not been keeping pace with spending. So we've seen higher and higher deficits. We've seen the federal debt is now double what it was 10 years ago. The deficit's also more than double. So at some point, you can't tax anymore. You put it on the nation's credit card, and you see the debt go up. Unfortunately, financial markets aren't going to let you do that forever. We're also already seeing interest rates, long-term interest rates rising across the world as bond markets become worried about how much debt government have. And so this doesn't really end well. And we in Canada, of course, have seen a version of that play out in the early 1990s.
Let's obviously, we're all waiting for a federal budget. It's months overdue. Hopefully we'll have some more clarity about the situation in the fall when something is produced. But it's pretty clear that the Mark Carney government is spending the summer making spending announcements. Now, some of them I would sign on for, increasing military pay. I think that's something that's past due, but it all adds the spending. So, and it all, unless you do something else, adds to the deficit. So, what's your analysis of that particular part of the situation?
Well, the reality is, someone once said, to govern is to choose. And it's a good thing to be spending more money on defense. It's a good thing to be cutting taxes, but you've got to find the money from somewhere if you really want to run a prudent government. To be fair to the Carney government, they've launched a spending review exercise, trying to take out 15% out of direct program spending over the next couple of years. The question is how successful they're going to be, because, of course, government's grown so much. Ministers, a lot of the ministers are the same ministers, and they're going to have to make cuts in programs that they themselves have expanded. And that's not going to be politically very easy to do.
Yeah, and of course, you and I have had that experience of being in a government that wanted to constrain spending a little bit. It's always a question of difficult political choices and unintended consequences, and it's just difficult to do in Ottawa because of passive or active resistance. On that happy note, we're going to take a brief break for our friends, our sponsors, and we'll be back with our guest after these commercials.